Don't do it. Don't make the mistake I did. Don't watch every single episode. It's not worth it. Well, that's not entirely true. It's a bit complicated. Let me explain. If you're an anime fan, the chances are you've likely found yourself using a less than reputable site before. On those sites, there's usually a section dedicated to trending and popular anime. That was my first encounter with it. An anime by the name of Detective Conan, or Case Closed in the West. Detective Conan was an anime I sort of knew about purely through cultural osmosis. It had been referenced in so many anime that I thought I understood what the main concept was. A little boy with glasses who solves crimes or something for 1,000 episodes. Sounds simple enough. I knew that Japan really likes it, and when I say really like, I mean like really, really likes it. To the point where they have an entire town named after the main character, Conan, called Conan Town. I mean, like, just look at it. If that's not stan behavior, I honestly don't know what is. Also, I know it's just to drive tourism to a relatively unknown part of Japan, but let's not talk about that now, okay, thank you. So, one day I decided to see what all the hype was about. It was about this little kid who solves mysteries, right? Could it really deserve its own whole town dedicated to it? Can't be that good, could it? From this point on, I'll be spoiling the entire plot of Detective Conan. I highly recommend watching it for yourself, but this is your final warning. Where do I even begin? Okay, let's start off simple. Who is the boy in the glasses, and why do I care about him? So, our story starts off at Teitan High School with a 17-year-old boy named Kudo Shinichi. Shinichi is your average everyday high schooler, except he's really not, like at all. Shinichi is the son of famous former actress Kudo Yukiko and legendary mystery author Kudo Yusaku. His house is absolutely massive, and I mean, just look at this library. Needless to say, the Kudo family is doing, well, extremely well. Okay, well, what about Shinichi himself? Well, Shinichi Kudo, besides being a normal high schooler, is also a genius-level soccer player and works pro bono for the police as a consultant? It's never really explained what his connection to the police is, but they usually call him when there's a mystery that the police aren't able to solve by themselves. He's also extremely good at a lot of other things. I mean, just look at how long his entry for skills is on the wiki. Needless to say, if something is required for solving a mystery, he's probably pretty good at it. The main cast of characters alongside Shinichi are his love interest, Mori Ran, Ran's best friend, Suzuki Sonoko, Ran's father, Mori Kogoro, and a general cast of recurring police officers. Ran is actually a more interesting character than I thought she'd be originally. I thought she would be sort of like the generic girl that the protagonist pines over for the crux of the show. Sort of like a Tsubomi in Mob Psycho or a Kozue from Baki. A girl whose purpose in the story is to be more of a goal than a person, essentially. But from the start, Ran is shown to be her own character. Ran is extremely proficient in martial arts to the point where she's one of the best fighters in their city. She's very smart and occasionally will solve mysteries on her own, and often she becomes the emotional core for the main cast. What I mean is, by the later cases of the show, everybody sort of acts a little bit blasé towards the crime is being committed. The producer of the show actually even noted that by episode like 800, the cast is dealing with maybe 4 to 5 crimes per day. And you know, like, after seeing your 11th murder of the day, things kind of get stale for many of the characters. But Ran is constantly trying to do her best and is actively invested in the events around her. And I just think she's neat. After Ran is her best friend Suzuki Sonoko, and oh my god, where do I even begin with her? I'd like to pose a hypothetical, okay? So I'd like you to imagine you and your normal friend group, alright? So there's you, your friend Raj, your buddy Lizzie, John, and lastly, Jessica Disney, daughter of Tim Disney? Yeah, you know, your good friend Jessica Disney, heir to the Disney fortune, right? That's basically who Sonoko is, and it's actually insane. Sonoko is Ran's best friend, in addition to also being the heir to the Suzuki Zaibatsu, which is said to be the second biggest conglomerate in Japan canonically. Let's see the real world equivalent of what that would be in the US. Ah, yes. You know, your average mom and pop company, Amazon. And this isn't something that's like brought up as a gag and then forgotten about later. No, the fact that Sonoko's family is extremely wealthy is constantly brought up. Sonoko herself as a character is sort of like this mix between boy crazy and arrogant rich girl all in one. But her main quality is actually that she's a really caring friend to Ran. There's this theme in a lot of episodes, if you could even call it that, where Sonoko finds a really good deal on something and suggests that the main crew goes to check it out. Whether it's a buy one get one free ice cream shop or something, she's usually on the lookout for really good deals. I mean, ideally, she could pay for everyone all the time forever and still have like $1 billion left over, but she doesn't. Early in this series, Sonoko mentions how Ran refuses to go with her on a ski vacation. Ran citing the fact that she can't afford to go along with her, but Sonoko insists that she would be able to pay for her, so she should just come. Ran puts a hard line down in that moment and said she doesn't want their friendship to be based around things or warped by things like money, no matter how rich Sonoko is. And I gotta say, I respect her for it. Ever since that interaction in the anime, Sonoko is often looking for deals so that her and Ran can go do things together. And honestly, I think it's very sweet. Whether or not you agree with Ran's decision, you have to respect that she put a hard line in her friendship, and Sonoko respects that fully. Sonoko has more than enough money that she could personally buy every store she and Ran enter. But seeing this billionaire girl constantly look for coupons and discounts solely for her best friend is honestly very cute to me. After Sonoko is Ran's father, Mori Kogoro, and Mori certainly is a dude. Mori is a former police officer and now private detective. He's basically a bumbling idiot who takes credit for solving the majority of cases in the show. But like, he's not doing it maliciously? Conan basically solves most of the mysteries and then he knocks Mori out and then uses his voice changing bow tie to make people think that Mori solved the crimes. Yeah, no, this show is really dumb, but like, let's just ignore that. Anyways, so he's kind of got like a wandering eye when it comes to women, which is why he's currently separated from his very successful lawyer wife, Kisaki Eri. Aside from those characters, there are a lot of recurring side characters like Professor Agasa, who's an inventor, who helps Shinichi out, all of the police officers, the detective boy club, rival detectives, and just rivals in general, as well as the main bad guys. Look, there's over 1,000 episodes of the show, so if I don't add a Okino Yoko or Conan's voice actress, who is a canonical character who exists in this world, separate from Conan, then please forgive me if I can't name everyone. But if you've been listening to me so far, you've probably realized there is something I haven't mentioned yet that's kind of important. So you might be asking, yelling at your screen even, where's the funny glasses kid? We need the funny glasses kid. You said you went over all major characters, but I didn't see the funny glasses kid. Where is he? Well, I've actually introduced him. Sort of. Does that count as clickbait? Can I clickbait inside the video itself? Anyways, so I'm just gonna put these two images on screen and not say anything. Figure it out? Yeah, no, it's the same guy. It's literally the same guy. How is this possible, you might be wondering? Well, let's talk plot. Detective Conan, on the outside, is a mystery of the week kind of show. The gang stumbles into a mystery, there's 3 suspects, Conan solves the mystery, rinse and repeat. It's the kind of show you'd have on in the background or put on for your kids, and kind of just let them zone out. It's nothing high stakes, and if you're not paying too much attention, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the episode, Conan will basically just explain everything back at you. That's a correct and completely valid way of watching the show, in fact. I would say that's what makes the show so popular in the first place. However, it's not the entire story. So, Detective Conan has 3 separate canons. A canon, if you're not familiar with the word, is just something that's used to describe a storyline within a piece of media, and generally it refers to the original one that's intended by the author. An example of this would be an important episode, let's say, like the episode where they fight the final boss. When something isn't canon in an anime or manga, it's usually called filler. And filler is exactly what it sounds like, an episode or other that's intended to only fill space or time, and is usually not connected with the original canon and never will be mentioned outside of the episodes in which it appears. It's usually lower quality than the canon episodes of the anime, and are usually pretty low stakes if they're not, or if they're not, the status quo is usually restored by the end of the filler. If you're familiar with anime, you probably already know exactly what these things are. An example of filler would be a what if episode, like in Naruto Shippuden where they have a small arc to see what would happen if the Uchiha survived, or something not connected to the story at all, like the Bound arc from Bleach. Okay, but what about Detective Conan, and why is there 3? The 3 canons of Detective Conan are the manga episodes, the movies, and the anime-only episodes. If this were any other anime, I would have not considered the movies or anime-only episodes part of the canon, but that has to do with how Detective Conan is actually written. Detective Conan is basically written like a good Dungeons & Dragons game, where Dungeon Master often creates things for their players, but only a select few of those things, like NPCs or cool items, actually stick and become memorable, and it's usually the ones you don't expect. The movies and filler episodes will often introduce newer interesting characters or relationships, and the creator, Aoyama Gosho, will basically be like, I like that, it's canon now. And he does it all the time. Here's some images of characters who were not originally canon, but ended up sticking. You notice something? Yeah, the entire police force of Detective Conan was not canon. That's a lot of characters. The only originally important characters were the higher-ups in the police force. Okay, but why am I telling you this? What does this have to do with the funny haha glasses boy? Well, it depends on how you want to watch the show. At the very start of the video, I said not to do what I did. That was a reference to the fact that I watched every single episode of Detective Conan. Why did I do that? Because I'm a big dumb idiot, that's why. For me at least, even knowing at any point that, Tamanosuke can suddenly become canon from the filler episodes wasn't really enough to incentivize me to recommend watching this show this way. But I do recommend watching the show for its plot. The plot and characters are what I think make the show different than any other mystery show. The only times I was ever actually enthralled by a mystery was usually when it involved characters I liked. All clues point to the main character being the culprit? Sign me up, baby. So what even is the plot of this detective show? Well, here's the elevator pitch. High school detective Shinichi Kudo, while on a date/not date with his childhood friend Ran, notices a shady deal going on and tries to put a stop to it, but gets caught by the criminals. Instead of killing him, they decide to force him to test a drug that supposedly leaves no trace at all. Unbeknownst to the criminals is that after they leave the crime scene, Shinichi isn't dead, but rather he's reverted to the body of his 6-year-old self. Shinichi, now under the pseudonym of Edogawa Conan, lives with Ran and her private detective father as a favor. While going on cases with Ran's father, Conan investigates who those people are and also how to get his old body back, but instead finds a conspiracy that leads all the way up the chain of commands with forces that have even more money and power than he could ever have expected. The plot itself is pretty basic on its own. Where it gets interesting is the characters. The characters, including the villains, are never waiting for the plot to happen at them. Most people are actively doing their own things and trying to further their own ends. One example of this is the villain Vermouth. By the way, all the villains have codenames based on alcohol. Vermouth is the second in command in their evil organization. She directly works for essentially what's the final boss. She's a master of disguise rivaled by the occasional villain/ally Kaito Kid. He's a whole other thing, bro. Just imagine Lupin the Third, but sort of less horny, I guess. And like most bad guys, she's trained in fighting and with guns. Where she differs is that she actually knows the secret identity of Conan, and really tries her best to not have to kill him. Because of how varied the villains are, it creates incredibly insane situations, like this time a literal child straps a dead man switch on himself, or Ran running in front of a barrage of bullets and forcing Vermouth to save her. Every villain is different and has different relationships to the main cast, and because of that, whenever they're encountered, it makes you think like, okay, what insane thing is about to happen, and how will things be forever changed from now on? By the way, I don't know if you know what a dead man switch is, and don't feel bad, I didn't either until I saw this literal 6-year-old child strap one to himself as a threat to remote. A dead man switch, if you don't know, is usually a bomb strapped to a person, and if that person dies, it goes off. It might be connected to, say, something like a heart rate monitor, or the person might just be holding a switch, and if they let go, usually when they die, it goes off. Needless to say, I was flabbergasted that this image exists at all. There's so many insane things that happen in Conan that make you crave the next big event because you never know what you're gonna see, and you're 100% certain it's gonna blow you away. Okay, like what about that time that Conan's about to confess his secret identity to Ran? Oh, by the way, he keeps it a secret from most people to keep them from being involved with the bad guys. But he's about to reveal absolutely everything to her. And then what happens? He himself appears at the door. Like, what even is happening? Or the time he's being hunted by the best sniper in the world, so he asks his friend, who's a former FBI agent, to help him out, and that guy outsnipes the best sniper in the world. Or that time he takes a case too lightly, and it causes a man to die, and after that point he never treats another case lightly. Or how about the fact that this policewoman is dating the world's best shogi player, but she doesn't actually know that he plays professionally, so whenever he meets somebody else in the cast, they're like, oh my god, this is a huge Japanese celebrity. And she's just like, bro, he's just some normal guy. What are you even talking about? Or how about the fact that Conan is harboring a dude who fled from the FBI in his old house, and how that guy is being hunted down by a barista from the local coffee shop, who's actually an undercover super cop named Zero, and there's so much wacky stuff happening, and also at the same time, there's so much serious stuff happening, and I love all of it. One of my favorite moments from the anime is when there's this detective from Osaka who shows up and he starts challenging Shinichi to a detective law since he hears he's this like big shot high school detective. By the way, there's a lot of those apparently. He's also one. But yeah, leave me a comment if you know any high school detectives in your life, I guess. So he declares that the next mystery that happens to be a showdown between him and Shinichi. But little does he know that Kudo Shinichi is now Conan. So it's literally impossible for him to take up this challenge. They go through the entire mystery while he shouts that if Shinichi doesn't show up, he wins by default. And in the end, he declares who the culprit is, only for Shinichi himself to walk into the room and explain step by step why he's wrong. This is the real Shinichi, by the way. Through sheer accident, he reversed the effects of the drug. This is one of my favorite scenes in the show, by the way. I'm not sure if I can play a clip with sound, but whenever Shinichi's on screen, his voice literally makes me melt. Like, it's like seeing your favorite character go into their like ultimate attack mode. It's like you're like, oh, things are like serious now. Also, if you've watched One Piece, Shinichi's voice actor is also the actor who does the voice for Usopp. But whenever I hear Usopp, I literally can't not hear Shinichi.
いや、そいつは違うな。そいつは違う。
So, turning back to the normal stuff, the fact that he can change back into his original self actually becomes a major plot point because it's temporary, and he tries to figure out how he reverses it, and he does. But it becomes like a curse because he figures out that every time he goes back into his original form, it's sort of like diminishing returns. So eventually he has to decide when the most important times he should and can turn back to normal with his friends and family. Imagine knowing that your time with the people you love is limited. How would you choose to spend that time? When are the most important times? Because the times that the ones you love find important, you might have no idea at all that it was important to them. Detective Conan is a dumb detective show where the main character is a little boy, wears a dumb blue suit, and uses a voice-changing bow tie, and has a watch that shoots a tranquilizer dart to solve crimes. It's also a show where a young boy is constantly forced to choose what events in the lives of those around him are important enough to warrant him to use what could possibly be the last time he could see those people, for risk of them getting entangled in his fight against this shady, evil megacorporation. For me, Detective Conan's main strength is not in its crazy mysteries, but rather in its characters, and the lives that each individual person lives, and how they all connect together. Most main characters are fleshed out extremely well. They often have a love interest, and we get to learn about them as a person and what makes them who they are. Basically, every main character gets this treatment, and it really makes you care about each individual character. My favorite example of this is Professor Agasa. I haven't mentioned him up until this point, except very briefly in the beginning part, but he's a friend of Shinichi's who builds wacky gadgets and invents stuff. He actually is the guy who built some of the devices that help Conan keep his identity hidden. Anyways, he's a character who's always helping Conan in the background, usually giving important information that can help solve a case or helping him deal with the evil organization after him. His job for most of the show is a supporting role for Conan. That is, until around when a character named Fusai is introduced. Fusai is the name of a big women's brand in the Conan world. Fusai also happens to be the name of Agasa's first love. Despite being in his 50s, Professor Agasa has been single for most of his life, but he's not unhappy. He's content with how his life turned out, and he's always willing to go out of his way to help the main cast or support them in any way he can. But his one regret, if you can even call it that, is that he never told his childhood crush, Fusai, how he felt about her. In a great 2-part episode, we learn about the professor's first love and how she moved away before he got to tell her his feelings, and the fact that those feelings actually never went away. The main cast then decided to help him with that, because before she left, she gave him a riddle hinting that he might see her again. But he never actually solved this riddle, so he kind of just gave up on seeing her. They end up solving the riddle, leading everybody to learn that every 10 years, Fusai comes to Bega City and waits for Agasa beneath a ginkgo tree. Nearly 40 years since they last saw each other, they're reunited, and we learn from an inner dialogue that Fusai herself has actually been too busy working and building a brand that she actually never found love. Her first love was Agasa, and she waited every 10 years under this ginkgo tree to tell him. When Fusai first came to Japan, she was bullied for her mixed heritage, and she was also a very shy girl. Agasa was the first person to make her feel welcome, and also was her first friend in Japan, and eventually she fell in love with him. In the current time, when she sees him surrounded by the detective boys group, who she assumes are his grandchildren, they're not by the way, and not wanting to ruin his established life, she decides not to tell him about her feelings of love and how they're still there. They're both still in love with each other, but unable to say it, which leaves it as a bittersweet scene between Fusai and Agasa where the two old friends reminisce on their lives, both unable to tell each other about their true feelings. Eventually, Fusai has to leave because her job leaves her little free time. She bids Agasa farewell, not thinking about what a fool she's been, but rather that she's happy that her friend was able to live a long and happy life. As she leaves, she's thinking about the next time that she'll be able to see Agasa, which is in 10 years. But her butler tells her that he has a feeling they'll be seeing each other much sooner than they think. Many of the side characters get several episodes dedicated to building their relationships with other characters, or just building them as characters. Here's all the characters who start off single and eventually get into a relationship. Also, if you're wondering, Shinichi and Ran, do they get together? And the answer is yes. It took something like 26 years in real life, but at least it happens? Will they or won't they? They will. Or did? It's moments like these that keep me glued to Detective Conan. I don't care what rich family is having their third murder of the week. I care about when Ran is kidnapped and Kogoro has to go on the news and plead for the kidnappers to bring her back safe because he loves his daughter. I care about Hattori Heiji pretending to be Kudo Shinichi right in front of a bunch of people who want to kill him so that he can help him out. I care about that time the recurring villain, Kaito Kid, shows up to a case in disguise and helps the main cast solve the case, and it's only revealed at the end that he was there disguised, and he was doing it because the case relates to his late father. Detective Conan is 2 shows in one. A Mystery of the Week show that can help you be distracted, or a show that makes you care for all of its characters, and has the episode count to prove that. Detective Conan is fundamentally different than every other show I've watched because it has the ability to be so loose with everything, and then focus on the characters and themes that it finds interesting, and it does so extremely well. If you've never watched Detective Conan, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite anime of all time, and of all the things I've mentioned before, I barely even scratched the surface of all the characters and arcs that have appeared. If anything I've mentioned at all interests you, my recommendation is that you watch all the canonical episodes through some kind of curated list. If I can find one, I'll link it in the description. But if you're here for the title of the video and you want to know if the show is good, yeah, it's pretty good actually. And if you wanted me to go through every single episode of Detective Conan, I'm not Brian David Gilbert. Could I do it? I guess so. Do I want to? We'll see. But for now, thanks for listening to me rant about a dumb kids show from Japan for who knows how long. If you like what I had to say, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. And please leave a comment on what you thought. Thanks!